I don't think there's ever been a greater time to get involved with BYU Athletics than right now.
I'm Mike Lacey, and I'd like to welcome you to Beyond the Game. Today we have two very special guests who have actually the same hairdresser, Mark Santiago and Brian Santiago. Welcome to Beyond the Game. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks, Mike. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, it's nice to be with you.
I'm pumped to have you here. Yeah. I play tennis with Mark, and he has to play with a special racket because he's left-handed. Are you a tennis player, Brian?
Yeah, I play a little bit. My wife's an avid tennis player, and I say plays on the circuit. She travels around the state and plays on 2 or 3 different teams and really loves it. And so I'm her sparring partner, and basically I run back and forth and let her just run me around.
Sweet.
So I play a little bit, enough that I have tennis elbow, and I don't really appreciate that.
No. In fact, we had Nick Greer on here earlier, and he had tape all over his elbow. But he said he injured himself playing golf.
That's hard to do.
How do you hurt your elbow, your right elbow? Well, anyway.
That's what they say when you hit the big ball before you hit the little ball.
Well, that might be it.
Hit the earth.
That might be it. Now, you guys may not know, you are aware of this because I've talked about this with Mark, but you both played at Provo High School. And back in the day, Provo High School had a reputation for one of the top basketball programs in the state, right? If not, maybe the nation. I mean,
the best.
The best. Oh, humbly spoken.
Provo High, the coaches, the program, the expectations, the buy-in from when we were young kids was next level. We wanted to be Provo High basketball players from the time we were young.
Yeah, I remember the Saturday in today's junior jazz world, every Saturday they had a league. And as third graders, fourth graders, you'd go to that, and all the Provo High players were the referees of the game. So you grew up just idolizing these guys, the Greg Balloffs,
they had
Kelly
names too.
Keep going.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, but yeah, you grew up from third grade up. That's what you focused on. It wasn't focused on football, baseball, anything else. You wanted to be one of those Provo High basketball players.
And I was aware of that even as a football player at BYU in the 70s and 80s. But then my wife and I moved to Farmington, New Mexico.
Oh, yeah. Let's go, the Farmington Scorpions.
And how, you're a Provo High School guy. How are you aware of the name of the Scorpions at Farmington High?
Well, at Provo High, we expected to win every game. And so we went down to Farmington for years. And back in the day, we thought it was like we were traveling to Texas.
Oh, it was a long way.
And we thought it was the greatest thing ever. We were going on the road to play in a tournament. And we went, and there were some great Farmington teams. And the other teams that came, the intensity of those tournaments were fantastic. But we went down there year after year and won championship after championship. I didn't know how much the people in Farmington really liked us, but we
respected you.
We had some great games down there. I still remember Rob Robbins, who went on to play at New Mexico.
That's right.
Was one of the players down there. But just that was our big trip. First cafeteria. It's where we would eat all of our meals while we were down there.
All you can eat.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. But yeah, that was a big deal. And going down to Farmington and at Pro I, it was just that was the magic of it. Mark started talking about some of the players as a young boy. I remember slipping in the gym watching Devin Durant play, and just thinking, man alive, if one day I could just be a player at Provo High like these guys, it was like next level. And then, of course, for me, my heroes growing up were my brothers, Mark and Kevin, were great basketball players, and their teams were state champs, and I wanted to be part of that. My older brother Scott played football, and so I just kind of came up super excited about watching these teams. I'm sure it was similar for you, Mark.
Oh yeah, yep. I'll never forget sitting next to my dad and watching Devin Durant play. He wasn't he
smooth?
Just so smooth, and just to see the way he behaved on the court, right? He was so level-headed and treated the other players that he was just destroying, but treating them with so much respect. And yeah, all those players, Kelly Pinniger I mentioned, and Greg Balloff, and just the list goes on and on. It was fun.
Sweet. I remember getting home from my mission. This was 1978. Danny Ainge was this new guy on the basketball team. Devin Durant came in a year or two later. But watching that team was just so fun. Loved the basketball team. And Scott Rooney ended up being my roommate, and Fred Roberts and Glenn Roberts, I lived in their house. Those were good days.
Those were great days. Those were legendary days. I used to collect, and we would get their autographs at opening blue-white scrimmage. They used to call it it was like a fireside that the basketball team would have that first night, and then we'd go and we'd stand in line and get their autographs. Each year I had all those autographs, but it was exciting for us because, dreams obviously start in those moments. But, I showed up to my first junior jazz with YBA back in the Youth Basketball Association. But I showed up to my first junior jazz practice as a kid, and I loved playing. Like, I'd grown up watching my brothers. We'd go on these family trips where my dad would work, and we'd get up at 6 a.m, and all of us go to the gym. And I just wanted to ball. I just wanted to play. I wanted to be like my brothers. But I show up at my first junior jazz YBA practice, and my two coaches are Danny Ainge and Steve Trumbo.
Really? Now, Steve Trumbo, he had the most funny sense of humor, or was he more serious with you guys?
He was Steve Trumbo.
He was,
and that's why you gotta love that guy to this day.
Absolutely.
But here was the magic of it for me.
What a great coaching staff.
Yeah, and from that time on, I had a relationship with those two guys. Ainge would bring me in the locker room after games. I still remember when he torched Utah. I was sitting on the top row. We had 2 seats in our family. My dad had 2 seats, and so, we had 7 children. So to go to the games, you had to have somebody in the neighborhood would call our family and say, we're not using our tickets. Then we'd gobble them up because we all wanted to be there. But I was sitting on the top row of the Marriott Center when Ainge just absolutely torched Utah. And then I went down afterwards, and he saw me in the, just standing there by the rail.
Outside the locker room? Or
no, I was up in the stands.
Okay.
But he, they were all kind of down there in the corner, and he saw me, and he went and grabbed me and brought me down, took me in the locker room. And I
felt like the guy with the Coke,
I was just really
Too Tall Jones.
For me, I'm like, this is, Ainge was a hero, and he's become a great mentor to me in my life, and we've had a relationship for that long. It literally goes back to those days. And then when his kids started coming to BYU, he was done with his NBA career. We started to reconnect a lot and started playing golf together.
Oh my!
Steve Trumbo is a dear, dear friend of mine, and we lived in the same neighborhood. We've maintained a really close friendship with he and Carolina. There's just some really great things that have come out of these dreams that were brought on when we were young kids.
When you were just kids.
At Marriott Center.
Isn't that sweet?
Yeah.
And then it translated over to the Smith Fieldhouse. We'd go down in the summers and just hang out and just try to get into any game we could.
What years do you think that was?
It's in the 80s.
Early 80s.
Wow. Maybe we played against each other.
So we'd go down.
Were you on the main court?
Oh, yeah. We'd stand there on the side.
Were you there when the football team came out?
I know the football guys, some of the guys would come play.
Yeah.
But
because I was one of those guys.
Remember it. You remember just waiting and trying to get in the game?
Yeah. Just standing on the sideline, just hoping they needed one more guy.
Oh.
Then we'd jump in there and contribute where we could, make a few shots, throw a few good passes.
My favorite championship story was our basketball team in the 5A championship with Mark Wilson, me, and some other guys, and Glenn Roberts.
Oh yeah.
After he was done with the basketball program, Fred took his spot. And we went up against the volleyball team who had Keith Rice on their team. Oh, yeah. So here, and I swear, not the Marriott Center, the Smith Fieldhouse stadium or stands were full for this championship game. And we beat them by 1 point.
Oh,
and it
wow.
was so fun.
Oh,
it
that's
was
awesome.
the best basketball that I did. But, I grew up, in the wrong era because I was 6'4" back then, but I was the football player. So I had to be the guy holding Bill Cartwright out of the key. Their school was just, 4 miles away from us.
Oh, wow.
And so I had to be a post guy. I was always jealous of you guards who got to handle the ball. It's just not. And now, look at these post players in basketball who I see. Is it Yegor Damon?
Yegor.
And these tall kids, 6'10" or whatever, that are good ball handlers.
Great. Yeah.
I love it.
It's so much fun to watch. I think back to just those times, the one thing that Provo High, they taught us how to play the game the right way. And we both, our teams won state championships. Kevin won state championship, maybe 2 of them. And they were all done with mid-sized post players. So when you were just talking about you being a 6'4" post player, I just started thinking about Dwayne Johnson and Cam Jarvis.
We ran the court.
And all the guys that just knew how to play the game. And our center, our state championship year was 6'2".
Really?
That was our center.
Okay.
Tommy Rogers, he was a consensus all-state. His arms hung down to his ankles.
Specimen. He still is today.
Yeah. We lost.
Amazing.
We lost to Bill Cartwright's Elk Grove team in the semifinals in the the Northern California State Championship. So we had a good basketball team.
Yeah, but
we could run.
I bet you really knew how to play the game down at the post. You could dominate guys in the post. You got to use your body.
I had a very good spin move.
Yeah, unbelievable. It actually makes me excited because that's how we grew up playing the game. Is the fundamentals of the game. We thought it's footwork, fundamentals, making the right play, making the right pass. We weren't flashy. You threw it around the back pass at Provo High. You might be over there sitting on the bench immediately, and maybe for the rest of the game.
But the weeds taught you so much, right?
Everything.
All of that.
We just played the game the right way, and we figured out how to win. The thing that I loved the most.
That was obvious in Farmington. When we moved to Farmington, we saw Provo High come in and dominate. And that was in the 1990s, so I was after you guys.
Yeah, but going back to this time at BYU, standing on the sidelines, waiting and hoping somebody would pick us up. And that's kind of how we kind of found our way in. And I
bet we rubbed shoulders back then.
I'm sure we did, but for
or
me,
even not
I was
shoulders.
A little later, but I specifically remember Mike Smith coming over and handpicking me.
I was in the bishopric of his ward his freshman year.
There you go.
And what a guy. Yeah. And he also had a funny sense of humor.
Yeah, but those were just great memories. Those were just kind of those things that happened for us where that kind of spurred the dream. Like, we belong, we can play.
It's a real confidence booster, right?
Yeah, huge confidence.
Because you get into those pickup games on the main floor and you do 1 or 2 good things, right? And then all of a sudden your confidence goes up.
And your
the guys respect you,
they
trust you, and so then Mike Smith's picking you out, saying, "I want you in my next game."
Yeah, and that's where it was.
This
really
feeds
good.
off itself.
Yeah, it's really
that's fun.
Yeah,
and I don't know why, but basketball was always my favorite sport. I loved football, trust me. But if I would have either been a little bit shorter, and they would have let me play some other positions, or if I had a better shot, I was the Dennis Rodman of the Cordova High School Lancers. I got all the rebounds.
That's class.
Because I raced to them. But life was good.
Basketball was our thing, but we never missed a BYU football game. We saw every BYU football game. We had 4 tickets in football, kind of high up, section 135.
that's right.
and we never missed a game. We went to every game. We loved it.
What are the teams that you remember the most?
All the quarterbacks. You can go back through.
Isn't that amazing?
For me, it was McMahon those years. McMahon, and then I remember Wilson as well, and McMahon sitting out, but Wilson and McMahon, and I remember
Gifford, yeah.
Gifford was another Provo
High School guy.
Mentor. It's been another great confidant.
And a great golfer.
And a good. He's good. Yeah, he is great.
He's only good golfer. Oh
no,
I'm never going to play Brian.
No. He actually is great. I'm actually just ribbing him a little bit because we've played a lot of good golf together. But those quarterbacks going back right through from Gift to Mark to Jim to Steve to Bosco, we had it all mapped out. Who was sitting out? Who was going to be the heir apparent? We used to love when they'd get holding calls because it was more passing yards.
It was the greatest thing ever.
It was fine.
Back them up.
And then Casey Tiamalo, the little draw plays every once in a while, and they'd run forever. We loved
ball.
We loved BYU football. We never ever missed a game.
Were you there before the stadium got expanded?
Yeah. Oh yeah, and we'd go over in the knot hole. So at halftime, we'd be playing full-on tackle football in the knot hole and then come back on to watch the game in the second half.
Wasn't that amazing, though? They brought in those really high, before they built the stadium or redid it, we had really high non-permanent stands in bleachers, end zones. You know? So even though I think the capacity of the stadium was 30,000 or something, we were putting 40+ thousand in that stadium, and it was so fun to come to a standing room only game, and whether it was Jim McMahon or Mark Wilson, Steve Young was just coming up when I was in there. But think about those times, and so I can liken this. Mark and I went to watch and you were there, Brian, but watch the basketball team just a week or so ago. And this basketball team is so exciting because you've got all this, this newness, a new coach and all these top-notch players coming in, and yet meeting them on the court afterwards, and each of them coming up and expressing it felt sincere, gratitude that we're there, supporting them. I was super impressed. So here's my thing. There was one year, 1978, where Mark Wilson and Jim McMahon actually split time. It didn't work out. LaVell talks about it being one of his biggest, mistakes or issues. But the next year, Mark Wilson took the reins and Jim McMahon redshirted. Think about that, though. Jim McMahon and Steve Young, you had Robbie Bosco. Most of these guys would be on the bench for a couple years. And you had so much talent. Think of it. In that one quarterback room, there were 3 Super Bowl champions. Yeah. Ultimately, they would be Super Bowl champions. And yet somehow they had the patience to wait their time. So now that was maybe a different era where they expected that. But what do you do with this basketball team where you've got so many great guys that, could all stay in the game 40 minutes or how? What's a full game now?
Yeah, it's 40.
40 minutes.
So
what are we going to do?
Oh, it's fantastic.
It is. It's a great problem.
It's raising the level of competition, and we have a great core group of guys. But the magic of those days, at least in my estimation, with LaVell, with the quarterbacks, with them buying into the system, buying into the culture, knowing that they were going to get their opportunity to learn, to grow.
They did.
They were 100% bought into it.
Good.
And in today's world, it doesn't equate because these kids are from day one. If you're not the guy, I'm out. I'm transferring.
Right.
I don't have patience. So it's an unbelievable tribute, even though we're in a different day and there's a lot more at play right now. It's a tribute to LaVell, to all those great coordinators, to really the football program that established kind of a unique, we're the best at it. We throw the ball, you're going to get your turn, and when you do, you're going to throw for 10,000 yards. I mean, if you really think about it, it went all the way down until you get Ty Detmer, and he was sat and watched. Ty Detmer was a Heisman Trophy winner. He sat and watched for a year. I know he came in a little bit.
He came in earlier than most.
But again, he was knowing that, hey,
I'll get my chance.
I'm going to get my chance, and we know what he did with it.
But they bought in.
But they bought into it, and I think it's one of the things that's happening right now is these players have bought into Kevin Young, and this idea. Kevin said it in his press conference. We want to be the very best program in the country in preparing players to come in to go to the next level and play in the NBA. Well, if it actually plays out that way, you're going to see a continued pipeline of players that are going to want to come be here because everybody's bought into it. At first, it was a little tough. Like guys that are coming back, wait a second, who are all these guys you're bringing in? But when you actually get on the floor with some of these new players and you realize how it elevates everyone's game and everyone's better, the guys are bought into them. They're bought into the coaching staff. You've got a coaching staff that's got an enormous amount of experience around the world in professional basketball, not just Coach Young and as the head coach, but most of the other coaches have professional experience. And you have an excitement like they really are going to develop us. I got a message I was just working on before we started this podcast from coaches that are reconnecting with a former assistant coach at BYU that now working with the World NBA program, the Nike program, that there's a player from overseas that is starting to ask a few questions about, hey, what's going on at BYU? That wasn't happening in the past, but I think everybody has just kind of bought into the fact that, hey, these coaches really can help us be great. And I think it's now the responsibility of this new coaching staff. They've been here for 2 or 3 months. We haven't played yet, but
expectations are pretty high,
and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you have high expectations and you can manage it, even better. But you should have high expectations. We have some incredible players in that gym. And I think that it's a tribute to the staff that they've established some credibility. They've shown it in the practices. You guys were there. I mean, what did you see at the practices? You guys watched it. I'm kind of in it, but I'm curious to know what you guys thought of it.
Yeah, Mike and I talked about it as we drove home, but just the level of competition, like there's so much at stake.
In the summer,
in July.
Here it is in July.
Like back
many
in the day,
months before the season starts.
Yeah, back in the day, we were talking about you showed up first day of school, and that was your first kind of, let's get the season started. But now it's mid-July, guys diving on the floor for balls. Every possession mattered. It was, I was just loving it.
I was too. And the guys from last year's team who may feel a little threatened, they seem to be fully bought in too, because I saw I don't know, I'm watching eyes, body movements, yeah, their confidence growing, and you could see that it felt like they were all buying in together. That's what I saw.
That's what's happening, and that's when I say
the body language.
The bar has risen.
Yeah,
and the confidence level of our players. We all want to win, and you might in this day and age say, "Oh no, they're bringing all these guys in. What's it gonna?" But when you actually get on the floor, and the 3 or 4 guys that have come in make you a way better player, you can forget about all the other stuff. They just want to be great. You want to listen. We're in the Big 12, and night in and night out, you want to know you're walking on the floor with guys that can go get it, and as a team you can go get it. That's you got to tip your cap to what happened last year with Coach Pope and the staff.
I do,
and their team. We ever picked 13th out of 14.
They
night in and night out,
expectations.
Night in and night out, our guys walked on the floor in every game and believed they were going to win.
Yeah,
they did an unbelievable job. And in the Big 12, as players, you want to be surrounded by guys that you're not going to get exposed. We can go play toe to toe with anybody with that lineup. It's super exciting. I'm glad you guys saw it, but I went in there one day and my hair actually grew because I'm watching.
You had to shave a little faster than
I'm watching a group of 4-on-4, and one of the teams had 31 points in 4 minutes in that intensity, and I'm like, this is unbelievable. They're playing at a high level, and you just want to know that you have enough talent and toughness to go out and compete night in and night out in the Big 12, and that's why I think everybody's so excited.
And the Big 12 is arguably the best basketball from top to bottom conference in the nation.
One thing that got me excited at that practice was watching I'm not sure which assistant coach it was, but the teaching that was going on.
Yeah.
They were working on this team defense, and it was top notch.
And the kids were paying attention.
They were learning, they were doing
in July.
Yeah. And I want to switch gears here for a second, because what's happening in basketball is only raising the level for everyone. And one of the things that we're excited about with Kevin Young is he's obviously the alignment, but Kalani Sitake has done an unbelievable job in establishing a culture where these players want to be here. We didn't have players. Every other school had 10, 20, 25 guys jumping in the portal. Kalani Sitake has done a great job with this as well. And it goes back to what you were talking about with LaVell. The buy-in from the players in our football and basketball programs is fantastic.
And I love how Kalani, more than some other coaches since LaVell, has really tried to emulate LaVell in more ways than maybe others. Because I know a coach wants to come in and have his own fingerprints on the program, but I love that Kalani is following a blueprint that obviously worked.
Yeah, and he embraces it. He had a special relationship with LaVell. And there's a stewardship that comes with those jobs. And Kalani, that's why I'm super excited about football.
I am too.
I think we're going to surprise a lot of people. I think our team's way deeper than we were last year. We started out 5-1 last year, had some key injuries, and had a hard time kind of maintaining.
But we're deeper this year.
We got more depth. We got more depth in the trenches. I think Kalani and our coaching staff have done a fantastic job of establishing something, and they'll use this disrespect is basically what we're getting. They'll use it to our advantage. Our guys are.
I sense that.
Yeah, and I'm super excited. I love the culture that Kalani's created because these guys are bought in.
I love Friday night, just the last week, we had what was called 100 years of BYU football. And there was a guy that was 91 or 92 years old there, that played for BYU. And then even kids, I call them kids because relative to me, they're kids, but players from the current team and all the rest of us. There were I think there were 500 people there, but at least 450 players. So awesome. It was awesome. And it was what most impressed me, because I met a lot of these people. I didn't go and get the food as much as I wanted to meet everybody, especially doing this podcast. I want to get your phone number, man. But anyway, I met Tyler Batty.
Oh, sweet.
And he came up with all the enthusiasm in the world. And Tyler Batty came up, and I'm with Mark Wilson and Brent Johnson, guys from my era. 3 of our offensive linemen, Danny Hansen, Scott Nielsen, Tom Bell, some other players there at our table. And he comes up and introduces himself. And just because of his the way he appeared, we all stood up. We wanted to meet him. I mean, he's one of the stars of the team. Anyway, what was so interesting to me is he made a commitment. He says, I'm going to get 20 sacks this year. That's a good goal.
Let's go.
I know. Let's go. 20 sacks is a big deal.
And if he gets 20 sacks, we're all going to be really happy.
We're going to be pretty happy. And, he has the capacity to.
No, listen, I think we've got some great players. I love that you brought up the 100 years of football. We talk about it all the time. The relationships, like you just named all your guys that you're sitting around with. The relationships are what we take with us, right? If we're only going to focus on outcomes day in and day out and lose track of the relationships, you talked earlier about LaVell and Patty, the impact Patty has had on so many of those players. LaVell's impact was widespread. Those are the things that matter, right? So I love hearing you talk about this reunion that just happened, a focus on the greatness of this program. I mean, BYU's football program is respected at a level as good as any in the country. And the relationships. That you talk about 450 guys coming back, sitting around at tables, talking to each other, connecting with each other, coming around on football Saturdays, being on the sideline.
Loved it.
You know, there's something magic in that stadium. You know, we're kind of basketball guys, but there's a reverence in that stadium.
Yeah.
And I've been around Tom Holmoe now for 20 plus years, and we're super close. It burns deep for Tom when we're in that stadium and our team comes out of that corner, and he's been doing this for a long time, and he played it. I mean, there have been some times where I look over, I'm like, my gosh, this is it runs in and burns deep.
Tom and I both were top sprinters. And so we were both on the kickoff team. I was a sprinter in high school. In fact, I was a unique sprinter in Sacramento, California.
Wow.
I was the tall guy that was a little paler than most of the other guys that my friends
Yep.
I was racing.
But you could go, huh?
I was a sprinter.
That's sweet.
So anyway, Tom and I would race down the field on kickoffs to see who would get down there first. Pretty sure that I won most of them. Tom might disagree. I wanted to, something you were just saying piqued my interest. Mark said something that was interesting last week. You know, the two guys, Brian and Mark Santiago, nice Irish name, right?
No.
No?
Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican.
Yes.
All right, so you told me about your parents and how they met. Tell me a little bit about your family life. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
So I'll go first. You can add to it.
Go.
So 7 children, so 7 siblings. We grew up in Provo on the East Bench there. My parents, it's a unique story. In fact, last night we've had a company put together a documentary on my parents while they're still alive.
Really?
They're in their upper 80s and still in good health. And so they put together this documentary. So we were all together last night to watch the premiere. And they talked about how they met. My dad's from the Bronx in New York City.
And was he Puerto Rican or were his parents from Puerto Rico?
His parents were born in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
He was born in the Bronx in New York.
Okay.
But grew up
Did he play basketball there?
He played mostly the sports on the street.
Okay.
Yep. Didn't have a lot of organized sports experience.
Wow.
But
you
he's
said
super athletic.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
well,
so
he
he's
had to
athletic
be
guy.
then.
So yes, he grew up in a little Puerto Rican neighborhood there in the Bronx. And when he was 18 years old, he joined the Air Force and went to Anchorage, Alaska. That's where he was stationed. And while there, a friend of his had a bunch of guys over to the house, and he's playing the piano, and they're singing and hanging out. And the gentleman's name was Warren Allred, and he said to that group of guys, like, "Have you ever heard of Joseph Smith?" And my recollection is the guys kind of laughed and joked, and they all walked out. My dad got out in the hallway and turned around and came back and said, "Tell me more."
Really?
And ended up joining the church.
As he said, what impressed him to do that? Felt.
That's what he felt in his heart.
Just he felt that way.
Yeah, he felt the Spirit, and went back, said, "Tell me more," and was baptized a short while later.
Do you know where he was stationed at the time?
It was right there in Anchorage, Alaska.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, Anchorage.
So I ended up going back home to New York, and there in the Manhattan ward in New York City, just was embraced by the members of the church there. And they all talked to him about BYU, which he had never heard of.
Is your father bilingual?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so they embraced him, and
they talked him into going to BYU.
Go to BYU.
Now that's a big move for a guy from the Bronx.
Yep. Never heard about BYU. And so he made the decision, packed up everything he had, put it in his old Ford Mustang, rolled into Provo with bald tires.
Oh, geez.
He said that the guy at the gas station in Provo said, "Son, how did you ever make it here on those tires?" But he had driven across the country. And so then that's my dad. And then my mom grew up in Tooele, Utah.
No. You told me it was a suburb of Tooele.
Erda.
That's right.
I've never heard of Erda.
The one street of Erda, Utah. So she was a cowgirl, rodeo queen, grew up on horses and cattle and all the true cowgirl.
So, wow. A cowgirl from Erda,
What do you want to add?
Utah meets, did he consider himself a city slicker?
Oh, yeah.
Your father from the Bronx?
That was one of the first people they met. They met right at the start, and they dated for
3 years.
3 years. And they didn't have anything. They didn't have any money. Neither of them came from money, but they were, it wasn't by chance, and that's why I think we all feel such a deep sense of loyalty to our parents. His dad took a lot of courage for him to stand up and say, I know what I felt, and I'm gonna be all the way in. And he was. And Mom is just like she literally is just one of the salt of the earth, kindest, hardest working, most selfless people. My dad's the same way. There's both two of the most selfless people you'll ever meet. And they gave us they just gave us an opportunity to chase all of our dreams. And from an early age, we were in it together. We everything we did was just together.
Yeah, in fact, I just remember how much they sacrificed for their kids to have opportunities.
And you grew up in Provo.
Grew up in Provo. Yep, I remember my dad loved to golf when he was younger, but when they started having kids, he hung up those clubs, right? Because we became his focus, and he'd come and rebound the basketball for us. And as soon as he got home from work, I'd throw him the catcher's glove and I'd pitch to him on the front lawn before he could even go in the house. And I remember once we had all grown up, I remember him a friend of his invited him to go golfing. So he went and grabbed his clubs and pulled his clubs out. And all of his clubs they were wood drivers at that.
Wow.
But they all had like rock marks in them because we had taken his clubs and we were hitting the rocks, driving them up into the mountain. But it just taught me a lesson of that didn't really matter to him. What mattered to him was his kids having opportunities and him being involved and just being so involved in our lives.
Taught us the value of hard work. Everything we did, we pitched in for the whole. We got a paper out that we all did after school every day that was just went into the hole, but.
So the money that you earned went into the family.
Family kitty.
Everything. We shared everything. We grew up sharing bedrooms. At one point, 3 of us were now you see the room is a lot smaller than this. 3 of us were in that room together. We shared everything. And I love that we get to be here and do this together. Mark and I were teammates. I was coming out of high school. I only had one agenda, and that was I wanted to play with my brother Mark, who was coming off his mission. And so we played together at Utah Valley. My brother Kevin.
This was when Utah Valley was a junior college.
Yeah, junior college.
And he was just coming home from a mission, right?
Yep, right. Puerto Rico.
So you got to play together.
But that was my whole thing. I had some interest from quite a few schools, but I was like, no, I'm going to Utah Valley. I want to play with Mark. My favorite teammate I ever had. We played together not only at Utah Valley, we ended up playing together professionally in Puerto Rico on the same professional team. But we shared everything, and that's the one thing our parents taught us, the value of hard work, sacrifice for each other. So when Mark and Kevin made it at BYU and were, playing at BYU, they would get their scholarship check. I got off my mission. We'd share,
divvy it up.
Then we'd divvy it up.
Really?
We'd all share it. So
really?
So we had a little bit, that was just it. We were willing to sacrifice a lot for each other, and that there was just a bond in our family with all 7 of us children and our parents that was just there's loyalty ran deep for all of us. And so those are just some of the fun memories that kind of taught us and gave us an incredible upbringing to kind of inspire us to go and try to make a difference in the world. And it's just, those were just awesome times.
Now, I served a mission in Latin America, and so Mark and I have spoken a little Spanish together. Brian, did you still speak Spanish, or did you speak it in the home?
Yeah, we didn't speak it in the home, but we all had a little bit of background with some classes at school. And then, Mark served in Puerto Rico. I served in the Dominican Republic.
Oh.
So I do speak the celestial language. And my brother Todd served in Colombia. And obviously my dad and mom went to Puerto Rico. My dad speaks it. It was part of it. He spoke only Spanish in the home.
So when did they go to Puerto Rico, your parents?
Probably early 2000, I think like 2005, 2006, right in there.
Why? To watch?
No, to serve.
They served a
Yeah,
mission.
they served a mission.
So had your mother didn't speak Spanish before?
No,
did
she doesn't. She still doesn't.
Okay.
But she probably understands enough. But it's still fun. We all speak to each other a lot in Spanish and love speaking the language to each other.
I do too.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful language.
Yeah. And it was kind of fun. We did interviews when we were playing professionally in Puerto Rico. They'd interview us and ask us why we spoke Spanish and our experience.
gringos
hablar
el español?
But it was fun to be able to tell our story, and just such good times together. Sports has been a huge part of our lives, but the relationships. The other thing that I just came to my mind that I want to say is, our parents taught us the value of relationships and how to treat people. Not only did we have an unbelievable example of the way they treated each other, which is something that we all we all revere them for just the example they were to us, but we saw the way our parents, especially my dad, the way he would treat everyone, from the janitors at the school to the coaches to other people. Like, they were just so kind to people. And so, yeah, they've left us a great legacy of how to treat people.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, Brian, we'll be ending up here in a second, but what are your final thoughts for our generally BYU Cougar faithful? Mark, what are some of what's your favorite story or a parting thought you might have for us here today?
Well, I thought a little bit about just my experience playing at BYU for Roger Reid, a guy that I am so grateful for.
We didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
We did not talk about that.
Roger's just a great man, and I just love him and his family. I just remember I walked on at BYU, didn't have a scholarship opportunity, and Nate Call was the one returning point guard, and he had burned his legs right before he came home from his mission. And then Randy and Robbie Reid were coming up through high school, right? And so they were going to naturally play there. And so there was this gap of point guards, and I decided to walk on. And Roger, he made it tough on me, but also opened the door of opportunity. And so I just owe a lot of gratitude to him for that. The experiences and the doors that were opened after that, I attribute a lot to him. But I just remember those experiences playing for BYU and just the pride for being a Cougar. And I remember every day in practice, Nate Call and I would about come to punches. Like, we'd go for it. And the things I learned from that were awesome. But those relationships playing for BYU and just the pride of being able to fulfill that childhood dream was just awesome.
There's something special about running out on the court in the Marriott Center and having those fans stand up. And
23,000 back in the day when I played, and we'd pack them in there.
Oh my heavens, I remember those days.
Won a lot of basketball games.
Good times.
They are great times. Frank Arnold just passed away a week or two ago, and Roger Reid took over. Actually, was an assistant to
That's right.
Frank Arnold. Brian.
Yeah, my angle's a little different. I loved those days of watching my brothers, but I've been at BYU now for 27 years and in the athletic department. Was on the staff for 4 years with Coach Cleveland, who kind of opened the doors of opportunity for me. I've been as an administrator in the athletic department now for 20 plus years. I don't think there's ever been a greater time to get involved with BYU Athletics than right now. You know, we all stand on the shoulders of legends. I say this all the time. Some of the greatest players in all sports in the history of the game. Some of the greatest coaches in the history of the game. There's never been a better time for people to get involved with BYU Athletics, and we need everyone, Cougar Nation, more than ever. Financially, resources, mentors. This is the time where we can create some of the greatest opportunities for these young people, which are like the best of the best in all of our sports. I just met with our soccer team today, had some meetings over in football. You can feel the sense of energy, but my point is that we're unique. Everybody can feel it. What we just did in the first year in the Big 12 is something that some of the great athletes that have gone before us said would happen. If BYU ever joins a power conference, they'll compete right at the top across the board. We're ready. And now we get to like launch into year 2, and with the landscape changing, with the settlement, with revenue sharing, with compensating these student athletes, I know it's a hard concept for people to grasp, but what a great opportunity to invest in the future of these young people and to give them opportunities to go out and make a difference and change the world. We're gonna put into play, starting with football and then men's basketball and all of our other sports. Some of the greatest young people are going to go out, and you're seeing it already. It's happening already in professional sports. We've got 7 Olympians at the Olympics right now. It's unheard of what's happening, and people are like, what's going on at BYU? The enthusiasm for the future off the charts. It's so exciting what's happening.
If I can put in my 2 cents or maybe 2 mites.
Yeah.
I've witnessed that as a fan,
Yeah.
you know, and I've been remote, but I'm close enough to the program that I can see, and I call them kids. These kids are adults,
Yeah.
and they're playing like adults, whatever sport they're playing.
Yeah.
But they're worthy of it. And what's so cool is that they're representing our institution, BYU, and then the church, who's the sponsoring institution, in such a good way, whether it's the Olympics or what they go in and do afterwards. You know, and when you look at my old teammates and how they, in their various ways, have represented, usually in very, very, very good ways, I'm proud in a good way of what. And so if I could put in a plug,
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with politics, and I follow it way too closely. You know, and I try not to get in conversations about politics, because in these days, that'll just get you in a fight with somebody. But it's fascinating to me how some of the presidential campaigns of the last 10 or 15 years have been built, some of them, on a bunch of small donations. And when you get an entire population of whatever, you know, that is contributing, it can really, you know, compete strongly with whether it's Wall Street or corporations or whatever. And so I believe, you know, if I were Ryan Smith or the owners of the various companies that sponsor BYU or represent BYU in so many good ways, sometimes I might get a little tired being Atlas, you know. But if the rest of us put in our two cents or more than that, but even if it's just $5 a month or whatever, when you multiply that by the people who attend a football game or a basketball game, it adds up. And so I highly recommend to all of us BYU fans, let's get in and have a small sense of ownership.
Let's go.
And when we do, then the others who are contributing even more, or who can, you know, feel like, hey, we're all in this together.
We need everyone.
We do.
We need everyone.
When you're competing against all these Alabamas and Ohio States, we need everybody.
We need everybody. And every last cent and dollar makes a big difference for us. And we saw it happen a couple of times. President Reid's been fantastic. He's talked a lot about becoming BYU and what BYU, the uniqueness of BYU, the second century address, all those things. But what ended up happening during COVID, when we were in deep trouble, I mean, we were $20+ million underwater, is Tom Holmoe came out and said, hey, we need your help so that we can sustain ourselves through this tough time. This is important for people to know. No tithing money comes to BYU Athletics.
Right.
And it's important people understand that. There's a level of investment we all have in the university and education, but nobody's tithing money is coming to BYU. That's why it's so important when I say to BYU Athletics.
Right.
That's why it's so important that everybody jump in right now. Because every little bit, everybody come in.
Let's do it.
And let's get on our surfboards, ride this wave. I think it's going to be one of the great waves that we've all remembered in BYU Athletics. And again, we're just standing on the shoulders of some of the greats. So it's exciting times. We're really excited about the future.
By the way, this is what I wanted to share with you. My father-in-law is up in the rafters of the Marriott Center. Dean L. Larson played in the days of Stan Watts. And so in my family, among all my kids and then nephews and aunts and uncles, basketball, in fact, when you think of the 1950s and how big basketball was, it's before our times, that we paid attention to. But BYU was a basketball school in the 1950s. And it wasn't until the 1970s that we became, quote unquote, a football school. But at the same time, the Danny Ainge era, the basketball program was doing great. So it's fun to see us following traditional paths. Let's go Cougs.
Let's go. Go Cougs.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Lake, for having us.
This was fun. Thank you for watching another episode of Beyond the Game. Remember to click here to subscribe and click here to watch our recent videos. Also, please follow us on social media. And remember, go Cougs.